On this episode of Black Ops, we will investigate Operation Ajax, the CIA MI6 joint overthrow of the Iranian government in 1953. In the early 1950s, Iran was experiencing a surge of nationalism centered on Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. He led a movement to limit the power of the Shah and assert Iranian control over its own resources, most importantly oil. When his government nationalized the British-controlled Anglo-Iranian Oil Company in 1951, the move made him extremely popular among many Iranians but triggered a major confrontation with Britain and alarmed Western governments. Britain responded with an economic blockade and global boycott of Iranian oil, which severely damaged Iran's finances. Oil revenues had been the backbone of the state, so the loss created inflation, budget shortfalls, and growing political tension. Inside Iran, Mossadegh's coalition began to fracture. Nationalists, students, and many urban groups still supported him, but royalists, conservative elites, parts of the clergy, and elements of the military increasingly opposed his leadership and worried about instability. At the same time, the Cold War shaped how foreign powers viewed the crisis. The United States and Britain feared that economic collapse could strengthen the Communist Two-Day Party and push Iran towards Soviet influence. Mossadegh's escalating conflict with the Shah also created a constitutional power struggle, leaving the country politically polarized and unstable. By 1953, Iran was a democracy under severe strain, caught between nationalist reform, economic pressure, internal division, and covert foreign intervention conditions that set the stage for his overthrow. In early 1953, British intelligence approached the United States with a proposal. Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had nationalized the oil industry, threatening Western economic interests and geopolitical strategy during the Cold War. Britain had already attempted to destabilize him, but had lost its foothold inside Iran. After Mossadegh expelled British officials, Washington became the deciding factor. Inside the Central Intelligence Agency, planning began. The operational blueprint was drafted by CIA officer Donald Wilbur. The goal was not simply removal of Mossadegh, but the creation of a narrative that made his removal appear legitimate. That meant securing the cooperation of Iran's monarchy, influencing public perception, and preparing the military to act at the decisive moment. Kermit Roosevelt Jr. had arrived in Tehran as the field commander. His role was one of coordination. Kermit was a grandson of former President Theodore Roosevelt. During World War II, Roosevelt joined the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime intelligence agency. He worked primarily in the Middle East, focusing on political networks, nationalist movements, and British colonial influence. This period gave him deep regional contacts and cultural familiarity that would shape his later career. Upon his arrival in Tehran, Roosevelt met intermediaries tied to the royal court, political elites, and military officers. The most critical figure was the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Without his formal authority, any move against Mossadegh would appear as foreign interference. Declassified cables later revealed how reluctant the Shah truly was. He feared retaliation, doubted the plan, and nearly refused multiple times. Intelligence intermediaries reassured him repeatedly, warning that failure to act could result in communist takeover or the collapse of the monarchy. Eventually, he signed decrees dismissing Mossadegh and appointing General Fazlollah Zahedi as prime minister. Those documents became the legal cover for the coup. The next phase focused on perception. CIA records confirmed that media manipulation was systematic. Newspapers were funded to publish coordinated criticism portraying Mossadegh as unstable, anti-religion, and sympathetic to communism. Writers were paid off. False stories were planted to create the sense that Iran was descending into disorder. Religious leaders became another influence channel. Some clerics were persuaded that Mossadegh threatened traditional authority. Financial support and political assurances helped secure their cooperation. The objective was to isolate Mossadegh socially before confronting him politically. Street activity was engineered as well. Declassified reports showed that crowds were organized and financed to stage demonstrations, riots, and counter-demonstrations. Some groups posed as radical supporters of Mossadegh to frighten the middle class. Others appeared as monarchists demanding the Shah's return. The confusion created urgency. If instability seemed widespread, military intervention could be framed as restoration rather than overthrow. The military network had been prepared in advance. CIA contacts identified officers willing to act once momentum shifted. Communication channels were established months earlier. Promises of advancement were quietly discussed. When the moment came, coordination would not need to be invented. It would already exist. The first attempt nearly ended the operation. When the Shah's decree was delivered, Mossadegh moved quickly. Officers involved were arrested and the Shah fled Iran. Washington expected failure and internal communications recommended withdrawal. But Roosevelt stayed. Operating in uncertain conditions, he reactivated contacts and increased funding. Demonstrations intensified. Military officers were reassured that American support remained. Later CIA assessments described this period as improvisation that saved the mission. On August 19th, events accelerated. Crowds filled Tehran. Police hesitated. Military units loyal to Zaheidi moved to secure radio stations, government buildings, and transportation routes. Control of information proved decisive. Once radio broadcasts announced Mossadegh's removal, perception shifted rapidly. Neutral actors began siding with what appeared to be the winning side. Mossadegh's residence became the final confrontation. Fighting broke out. His government collapsed. He surrendered. The Shah returned days later. Zaheidi assumed power. Operation Ajax was complete. For years, official acknowledgement remained limited. Public narratives framed the event as an internal Iranian political shift. That changed when declassified documents began emerging. CIA releases acknowledged the agency's central role in the coup. The documents revealed the depth of planning, the financial networks behind demonstrations, and the scale of media influence used to shape legitimacy. Historians were struck by several revelations. Internal memoranda showed something even more revealing. Some U.S. officials recognized the long-term risks immediately. Supporting a strengthened monarchy could generate resentment. Iranian nationalism had not disappeared. Stability might be temporary. Those warnings proved prescient. In the short term, Ajax became a model for covert regime change. It demonstrated how covert operations could reshape governments without open war. In the long term, the consequences were profound. The Shah's rule grew increasingly authoritarian. Opposition movements remembered foreign involvement. When revolution erupted in 1979, Operation Ajax became a symbol of external interference and political betrayal. Operation Ajax remains one of the defining intelligence operations of the 20th century, not because it succeeded, but because of what its success set in motion. Victories achieved in secrecy often create consequences that unfold in public for generations.